it's a panel discussion, actually. My apologies. For in-house production models, pros and cons. So that's going to be very interesting for those people who like to have resources in-house and see what the pros and cons are of that. Sound good? I think, Rodrigo, you are currently muted. I don't know if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Welcome. Welcome.
Yeah.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, not too bad. It's a fantastic, grey day again in Manchester, UK, as per usual. So nothing really changes. It's the new normal. Well, it's the old normal in UK, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, I do recall. Actually, I look back fondly when I used to live in the UK, and I don't think I had. Oh, I think my camera froze. I apologize for that. But when I did live in the UK, I have fond memories, and I don't think it was all gray all the time. So that's a myth. It's a myth. All right, so I'll be turning off my camera and turning over the presentation to you. I'll let you introduce your panelists, and I'll come back in towards the end of the session.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Hope you're having a great time in the Lock from Home event. I think before we start our discussion and introductions, let me congratulate Smartcat's crew for the excellent event that they have once again put together. It's awesome to be here and to be part of this Lock from Home community. Let me quickly introduce myself, the panelists, and the topic. My name is Rodrigo, Cristina, and localization has been part of my day-to-day for a big chunk of the last 15 years. I've recently joined T-Works, which is an exciting global LSP and an ambitious growth project. Fun fact about me, apart my surname, is that once in Stockholm, I got a ticket while having a meeting in my rental car with the localization manager of a notorious global brand. Let me now introduce you to our incredible panelists. I will start by introducing Esther from Indeed.com. For those who think that localization stakeholders do not like to get their hands dirty, like actual finger squishing in the soil kind of dirty, Esther proves them wrong. From a very young age, her passion for archaeology propelled her to a higher education in that area, and she worked also in a couple of days. Nowadays, getting her hands dirty means growing fruit and vegetables, so it's the new normal, I guess. Esther has been helping brands create great user experiences across global markets for the last 20 years. She's currently a localization operations manager with Indeed, a job site available in more than 60 countries. So welcome, Esther, and we are so excited to have you here. Our second panelist is Isabelle Weiss from Alpha CRC. A Swiss national and an avid downhill skier, Isabelle is an example of entrepreneurship in a time when Swiss women didn't even vote. Isabelle is a great example of how love for languages, hard work, and competence can turn a one-woman band into a global company that now employs some 350 people, mostly linguists. She was convinced at the time that a collaborative approach, allowing interaction and exchange across languages, would provide an enhanced customer experience. So welcome, Isabelle. An immense pleasure to have you as part of the panel. Now, last but not least, William Spalding from Spotify. Our last panelist is another multifaceted localization professional. As a DJ and party promoter, music has definitely a place in William's heart. Like in many high-profile localization programs, William managed to build a seamless integration between music and localization by recently joining Spotify as one of its localization senior project managers. William is one of localization's young rising stars who brings LSP and localization buyer experience to the table. Welcome, William. Also, a massive pleasure to have you here. Let me now briefly introduce this session's topic. When we started talking about this particular panel, we wanted to take a deep dive into a topic that we felt is many times underrated and underspoken in localization forums. The benefits and disadvantages of choosing an in-house model to deliver localization. The purpose of this discussion is not to limit it to either the LSP perspective or or in this case, the LSP perspective. So we brought Esther and William to listen to their perspective on the buyer side. So our starting point for this particular discussion will be a definition of what goes on or what an in-house production model looks like. So I can kick it off, and then I will pass it to each of the panelists. So the way I see an in-house localization model is, I would say, almost in a romantic way, as probably an incredibly refined example of a beautifully designed and crafted translation ecosystem with all of its components aligned and exchanging information. And this information can be anything from concepts, ideas, terminology, language preferences, and ultimately, when the model matures, it defines what best localization practices look like. So all of this is combined to deliver localization. So I think I've spoken enough. So it's a good time, right timing to pass it to our panelists. I would love to start with Isabelle and then go to the round table. So Isabelle, being the founder and owner of Alpha, an LSP with an extensive internal team, how would you briefly define, in your own words, what an in-house localization model looks like? Oops, I think you are on mute.
It looks like there is some audio issue, Isabelle. She's not muted. So perhaps we can start with someone else just to, and we'll enable her to give her some time to fix the issue.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Esther, do you want to take the lead?
Sure, thanks very much, Rodrigo. An in-house model. I think it's different whether you're speaking about the LSP side or vendor side, or client side. I've worked on both, and I can see how different, I suppose, the model should be. Like being client side, you don't want your internal team, your in-house team, to be any larger than it needs to be at all, and you absolutely don't want them to be performing tasks that an external vendor could perform just as well. So I think for me, the definition of an in-house model client side would be very much just the type of team that would liaise well with the rest of internal functions within the organization that look after that content journey. So there were discussions earlier on in this conference about the place of localization, in the user journey, the content journey, and so on.
I hear everything twice.
Yeah, I think you're muted now, Isabelle. Yeah. I'll just finish my bit, and then we can turn it over to Isabelle again.
Can I try, Isabelle?
So that's
Hello,
Yes, we can hear you, Isabelle, loud and clear.
can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Because I was hearing Esther twice. Okay, shall I be quick?
Sure.
Thank you again, Rodrigo. I know you have this very romantic vision of what it's like to have an in-house model. And of course, I started with that romantic vision as well. Basically, my idea was that translation, in a sense, is a cooperative effort, and that people who work alone from their kitchen sink without any interaction with colleagues within their own language or across language teams would not be able to produce the same kind of quality as I was envisaging for myself and for the company. So the idea was very much to have different language teams working with each other. French people would be able to check any problems they had or issues or language questions within their own team, but also with a team like, say, the Spanish people or the Italian people. And of course, it wasn't just linguists, it was also technical support, desktop publishing, graphics, etc. And the romantic idea was that the translator would be involved from the start of the project over translation, revision, QA, see how the graphics were being done, intervene at any stage to make sure that everything looked okay, was okay, that the hyphenation was okay, audio recording was okay. So it was really a vision that translation is not just taking a source and bringing it to a target language, but it involved lots of other components. And the closer these components were, the better, in my view, would be the quality. However, there was a bit more than that. I also felt that the interaction with the client was important, that the identification with projects, with clients, with products would be important. And that meant that continuity was important, so that the same translator would be involved over time with particular clients. They would know their preferences, they would know their projects, they would know what they liked, what they didn't like. And this, of course, would be not just for the translator's advantage or for my company's advantage, but also to the client's advantage. So the clients would know the translators that were involved in their project, and the translators in turn would actually own the project. Because what I had seen in the past, working as a freelancer, was that you would be involved from time to time with particular projects, but there was no continuity, there was no interaction, there was no feedback. And these were components that I felt were very important. I also felt that translators, especially if they worked outside of their own linguistic environment, they needed a constant exchange on a linguistic level with people from their own language community. And I think now that we are doing more transcreation, we are creating slogans, we are creating sometimes poetry, all sorts of things. It's even more important to have that exchange rather than to be working in isolation.
Great points.
So these were the main ideas. I felt it would be an advantage for the translators because they weren't working alone. They didn't have to run after clients. They didn't have to be project managers at the same time. They could really concentrate on the translation. And it would be an advantage for us as a company because we have better control. We can look after the continuity of the translation and the projects. We can also assess and monitor and coach the translators. And it would definitely be for the benefit of the clients who could count on a much better identification, ownership by the translators, and a constant exchange of ideas.
That is brilliant. Thank you very, very much. All very valid and strong points in terms of the definition of what an in-house production model looks like. I'd like to pass on to William, but ask him at the same time a question. Would you consider, in case you would be considering adopting an in-house production model, that you would have an in-house production model if you only had part of what Isabelle mentioned? So for example, if you have only one, project management or the linguist function or desktop publishing or engineering?
So just to clarify, could you reiterate the question? Like if a single one of those functions is in-house?
Yeah. If you would you consider it an in-house production model?
Yeah, I don't think I would. I think I would consider it more of a hybrid model. I think on the buyer side, being able to scale an in-house production model is really difficult. And while oftentimes certain functions will come in-house, perhaps localization engineering, obviously PMing, sometimes language specialists and language management, I do think oftentimes we see more of a hybrid model. So I wouldn't consider a single component of the whole like production workflow for localization being in-house to be an in-house model. And I also wouldn't even consider outsourced PMs contracted and working in-house to be an in-house model either. I think an in-house model would, as far as I define it, it would be an end-to-end production line, all managed inside the organization with zero outsourced agency work.
That is, yeah, that's really, really good point. And thank you also for your contribution in the definition. Thank you to the three of us, the three of you, sorry. I think we're ready now to, to move to the sort of core question, or the core discussion is, why should an end client or an LSP set up an in-house production model? So I will launch a couple of topics that we can develop. Namely, there is one that immediately comes to mind, which is, does the under one roof, the in-house production model, deliver consistently better translation quality than the most commonly outsourced model, or is it a myth? I'd like to start by asking Esther her take on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I strongly feel that the in-house model is really beneficial for quality. I think you get very well-rounded, like in the case of linguists, if you want to take the discussion towards linguists, perhaps, I feel that exposure, not just to many different clients, many different tools. You can get that even if you're a freelancer as well, but the exposure to engineers, to desktop publishers, to project managers in the organization, and client exposure, that gives you such well-rounded linguists. That, to me, that's a huge advantage. So even when I'm hiring myself, if I see people who have that in their CV, who have that in-house experience, that's always it's always a plus. It's always something I love seeing, especially if they have been lead linguists and they have had that kind of exposure to the client and client's needs, client complaints, and so on. That gives them. I think you can't top that. It's kind of an extension almost of a university of college in a very practical way. So for me, that's absolutely. Like I wouldn't have any doubts.
I can foresee Isabelle's take on this one as well. Isabelle, would you care to contribute?
Well, I think it would be very wrong to say that freelance linguists can't be excellent translators. I don't want to do freelance bashing. I think that would be very wrong. There are obviously some very responsible, very talented freelancers, and I'm the last person to deny that. But I think if you take your average translator, I definitely do think that because they get probably better job satisfaction and better, as I said before, identification with projects and with clients, I do think they feel more responsible about the quality. And there is also the peer-to-peer relationship, which I think forces the linguists to really give their best. Because if you're in a group and you get consistently bad feedback and you get a lot of complaints from the person that is revising you or reviewing you, then I think, you either pull yourself together because you really want to do a good job, or you go away, or you change profession. And I just think because of the support, because of the community that you're constantly working in, I think your chances that you can do a good or an excellent translation are better. And also your company always knows what you're working on, so they don't overload you. Whereas if you're a freelancer, a lot of the time you have to work at night, you have to work over the weekend, more people are sending you stuff all the time, very different types of things perhaps. And if you're in a company, in an in-house model, you kind of feel cared for, and you can raise your hand and you can say, hang on, I need help here, or I'm not so familiar with this particular thing. Can I get somebody else to help me? So that's still, you know, my main take on the whole thing.
Thank you, Isabelle. Thank you. I would love to hear William's take on this one.
Yeah, you know, I definitely agree with all of that. I think in-house models enable those opportunities and enable that environment and that feedback loop and that support structure that in turn encourages better work, better job satisfaction, better engagement, more ownership over the products and projects. But I would like to flip it on the other side and say that I do think it's possible to work with vendor partners outside agencies through outsourced models and also create that environment, provide that ownership, create those feedback loops, the correct resources, channels to the stakeholders. I do think that while an in-house model just naturally has that environment already established, that it is possible to create that in an outsourced model and you know, leverage some of those opportunities.
Great. Thank you very much, William, for your also very interesting opinion about the topic. I would like to launch still on the pros, per se, of setting up an in-house approach. I would like to launch, and this I think more likely for William and for Esther, you know, intellectual property protection and IT security play an incredibly important role when opting for a particular language service provider as a vendor, namely in highly regulated industries, for example. Would you say in your particular cases or the experience that you've gathered throughout the years, that you would be feeling more protected if you were choosing an LSP that has an in-house production model that works within the same team or with the same team of linguists? Esther?
I suppose I would. It hasn't really come up. Like I've worked on LSPs in the past, both with an in-house model and with a completely outsourced model, and it is possible to work with external resources, you know, while still protecting IP and so on. So it's not a complete no-no. It wouldn't be a complete no-no, but it has to be very well managed. So I suppose the preference would probably still be to have it managed in-house, but
very interesting.
Not totally necessary.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think as far as, you know, information security and such, NDAs are going to be signed whether it's with an agency that's subcontracting or with freelancers, and those need to be upheld all the same. So I think legality wise, the protections are more or less there, no matter the model. But I do think with everything managed in-house under one roof, and you know, there's less risk of those contracts being breached and whatnot. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So another pro for the in-house model. This I would say another. I have a question that's more. I think it's more for Isabelle. In terms of, you know, MT is such a big thing. It's not going to go away. It's going to get stronger. It's going to get bigger. It's going to get faster. It's going to get more productive and hopefully better quality as well as time goes by and data emerges. Would you say, in your experience, Isabelle, that in generally speaking, both when it comes to new CAT tools, or, for example, deploying machine translation across Alpha, do you feel that it might be easier to deploy any sort of or any kind of language technology supporting the linguists if you have them working for you on premises in-house than if you're using freelance linguists?
Well, again, I don't want to generalize too much. I'm sure there are lots of freelancers who are very innovative and who like trying out the latest technology. But again, if you take your average sort of linguist, who by nature can be quite conservative, I think our people here at Alpha, they get a lot of help from our technical people, from our operations people. We can easily organize kind of person-to-person tuition. We can do workshops. People can help each other across the desk if they suddenly have to use a new tool. Because however much we try to perhaps standardize on 2 or 3 CAT tools, there are always clients who insist on their own proprietary tools that may not be very easy to use. And so the linguists might get frustrated if they sit at home, as we see now with COVID. I think there are many more problems now with people working from home, not being able to solve problems, not being able to cope with new features, or people just forgetting to switch on the MT plugin, or not being quite sure how to make the best of certain technical features. So I do think we have an advantage there. I mean, I myself am quite conservative in some ways, but I very much believe in MT and the help that MT can give us these days. And I think it's easier for me to spread that kind of enthusiasm when I've actually got the people around me and I can show them how I'm using it and so on. So yes, definitely, I think with that, we also have an advantage. And I remember a time 20 years ago when we did also use quite a lot of freelancers, how some of them just simply said, well, I'm an excellent translator, I don't need a CAT tool. Now, convincing those people at the time that you couldn't survive without CAT tools anymore was actually quite difficult. So if there is a conservative streak in the freelance population, I think it's quite difficult to overcome that sometimes and convince them to go with the times.
Very, very interesting perspective. I think we've been taking this discussion towards the pros or in favor of the in-house production model, but I'm certain that there is a very valid reason why this particular model is either a hybrid model or not used at all in some or the vast majority of LSPs. So my question now, and this is sort of for the whole panel, in terms of scalability, and I guess that's probably the question that's most present in people's minds, is it really a problem? And how does an LSP, for example, deal with the scalability issue? Does it hire more the translators or internal translators, or does it complement or fill in or bridge the gap with external resources? What do you guys think about it? I can start with now William.
Yeah, I think on the LSP side, the argument is different, I believe, than within a buyer organization. My thoughts on the LSP side, I think, economies of scale is the big thing, right? That's what we're discussing here. Being able to outsource to a vendor that already has a huge fleet of linguists or resources and various technical areas available. So a single contract can suddenly open doors to hundreds of new teammates, right? And on the flip side, in that same vein, not having to manage each individual contract of every single linguist and all of the vendor management that would be involved in that. So I think, yeah, I think there's definite cons or not necessarily cons, but risks and challenges to overcome. And I think the size of the organization, the types of projects, the quality expectations of at least me on the buyer side, I have expectations of my quality, and depending on the budget, resource, and organizational like top-down leadership support that I have, I can make certain decisions to enable my program in different ways. And so I think that scale piece is huge. At least on the buyer side, I will outsource before I bring in-house if I don't have headcount, if I don't have budget to support expanding teams and bringing these resources in-house. So yeah, I definitely think the nature of the organization, its size, its state of maturity, and as well as its specific business needs play a huge role in those decisions.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you very much, William. Esther, I would like to listen to your take on this, especially because I'm assuming that indeed volumes make scalability and response capacity an issue whenever choosing a vendor. So would you be slightly more concerned with that particular issue if you were choosing or opting for a vendor that has an in-house production model?
We use vendors, that do not necessarily have the in-house production model, or that have a hybrid. I mean, most people have a hybrid model these days, anyways. It can work perfectly fine as well. We also have internal linguists ourselves, and I think they add an awful lot of value to the organization as well. Like William said it, it's all about cost and what value you're gonna get through your in-house people. So for us, it's very much about that, and learning to use your teams in a clever way, so that again, you're not duplicating effort or carrying out effort that the vendors are very well positioned to carry out. So that's the way we are using our teams. Within Indeed, our localization specialist teams, for instance, would be very much geared towards enabling the vendors to deliver what we need, and in terms of quality and so on, enabling them and I suppose bridging the gap between the internal needs that are not always well known and not always easily expressed to a vendor, and the capabilities that the external resources, the external linguists might bring themselves.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great. Yeah, I agree as well. I have, on the sort of cons, and this is more of a risk, and perhaps Isabelle could fill us in about this. Isn't it too risky to have such a large number of full-time linguists in the payroll, per se, of a company, in case you lose a client, or is that the main risk that you would think about whenever deciding, okay, let's hire more or less linguists?
Yes, that is the biggest problem that we're obviously having to cope with all the time, to basically assess in advance just how many people we can afford to take on, especially in the current climate where our clients don't really tell us in advance what to expect. So we have very few clients where we have an exact program and a schedule where we know in 3 weeks' time we're going to get 800,000 words. In 6 weeks' time we're going to get 100,000 words, etc. So that indeed is the main problem. It used to be easier when we had perhaps more clients who really, really wanted a partnership and who wanted to cooperate with us and who told us about their plans, what products they were bringing out. And these days, I think where many clients don't have a linguistic department in-house anymore, their understanding of what their language vendor actually needs is very limited. So they don't realize that for us, it would be really, really helpful. And for them, it would be very beneficial as well if we could make a plan together. So this is, like you say, it's a big risk. And it's like Esther said, you know, even us, we don't have a completely pure model anymore. We also have to add extra people when we have to scale up, quite clearly, because just because we have one project with 1 million words into German and Greek, I can't suddenly employ 12 extra Germans and 12 extra Greek people. So that is indeed the kind of dilemma that we're in all the time. And the other thing, I think William mentioned that if you have particular subject areas, for instance, we were suddenly asked to do a project on military drones. Well, I don't have experts for military drones, and some of our in-house people refuse to do that because they are pacifists, you know. Or if we had something, I don't know, for machines for butchers, well, we have a lot of vegetarians here, so they're not going to be working on butchers' devices, etc. So the model does bring with it, it's absolutely useless to deny it. The model does have various shortcomings, which we have to overcome by looking in the freelance community.
That's super, super interesting. And thank you once again, Isabelle, for sharing your experience. I think I have the last section of within this topic to go through, and let's see if we have some time for some Q&A. I call it the translators pathway. So I'm fully aware that a large chunk of our audience is composed of linguists, freelance linguists. So this next question is also ties in with our audience. How does the in-house model promote an essential career journey for someone that is a linguist? Would you say that, you know, making the enlarging the scope of what it means to be a linguist in Alpha, making it a bit wider, offering other alternatives like project management, engineering, account management? How does this play in your structure, Isabelle?
Well, I think the first thing, which is really important, it seems to me that if there weren't companies like Alpha that actually have an in-house model, it would actually be very difficult for a lot of translators who come out of university to start out a career as a translator. Because if you're a vendor who relies totally on freelancers, you're going to ask those people, what is your experience? And somebody who comes straight out of university clearly doesn't have that experience. So we, in a sense, and I see that also as an obligation for us, is to actually train young people, bring them in from the university, give them the mentoring and the coaching and the support and the help, and tell them how important it is to become a good translator and make the effort. If there weren't places like this, it would be extremely difficult for young people to actually get a foothold. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, of course, when you have a lot of different positions like we have, including, of course, marketing, quality assurance, sales, desktop publishing, coordination, project management, the young translators can actually have a look around. They can experience every day what else is involved in a translation company. And after a year or 2 years, they might come to the conclusion that translation wasn't really for them, that they weren't quite fast enough, or they didn't have quite the talent it took, or they found maybe the introduction of machine translation too horrific to contemplate, but they might like to still stay within the language industry. So they would come to me and say, well, what do you think? Could I become a project assistant and then perhaps a project manager? So I do think we offer a lot of opportunities for people. We have some people who've been with us over 20 years. They started as junior translators, they became senior translators, then they decided that they really like the technological aspects and the technical aspects. And one of them is now our operations manager. Another person has become a divisional director through many stages. So there are those opportunities. And of course, there are other linguists who really don't want to be project managers. They don't want to take extra responsibility. They don't want to go into marketing or sales. And they're just happy getting their work every day. They don't have to run after the invoicing. They don't have to remind their clients that they need to pay. They don't have to run their own website. They don't have to pay for their own CAT tools, etc. So, you know, there's so many different types in the language industry. And I think we provide a sort of healthy environment where a lot of people find their place.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Isabelle. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the contribution of the three of you. It's been fantastic. Great. We have, I think, a few minutes left for a few questions that I've selected. Okay. Esther, I think this is more for Esther and William. And not necessarily in the way that it's been phrased. So this question is by Anna Wards, and she asks, do your internal linguists at Indeed or, you know, Spotify act as kind of project managers for their languages, liaising with external translation vendors? So in case, I'm going to rephrase it, in case either William or Esther, you don't have any internal linguists, for example, your subject matter experts that are part of the in-country review cycle, if you prefer, would they be liaising with external translation vendors?
I can start on my side. So I can't speak, unfortunately, to anything Spotify is specifically doing, but my experience in enterprise programs, the short answer is yes. You know, I've seen language specialists that own the domain of their language work closely with either a single language vendor or MLV, multiple language vendor, to manage the quality, work closely with the linguists, provide training, education, context, heads up, like, you know, this project's incoming, here's the creative brief, this is the strategy. So yeah, I think there's definite space within an in-house model and linguists in-house to drive those conversations and own the quality for their language. You know, also depending on the role of the specialist, if they're a language manager or supporting that and what that looks like. And I think also in conjunction with that, there's another additional point that should be made, that I think linguists that work in-house also get exposure differently than freelance linguists, in the sense that They get organizational exposure to the different cross-functional working groups that they might be collaborating with. And there's a ton of opportunity if there's not enough volume to support the work for that language to leverage an individual's skills in other technical areas in the program that might not be directly related to the translation piece. So yeah, I think that's how I see it. And I definitely think to sum up the answer that yes, they do own that relationship and in many cases facilitate that collaboration.
Cool. Thank you very much, William. Esther, ball is on your court now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for us, we don't, the question, Anna, you asked about linguists, they're not necessarily all linguists. We have, we call them content localization specialists. Not all of them are linguists, and that was by design as well. I wanted a kind of a multidisciplinary team, if you like. They do liaise with vendors, but not in a project management role, or not as it's normally understood. It's more on a coaching, mentoring type of a relationship with them. The other big part of what they do is liaise with the internal part of the organization that can bring us the insights, what the customers need, what the users need, how they might be different from users in the US, and how we then might need to adapt content. So we bring that back to perhaps content creation teams, also to the external vendors. That's where the value of the team comes in. More so than the role that perhaps a linguist might have on the LSP side.
I would plus one that. Yeah, I think the exposure to the different working groups across the organization and being able to bring that information back and disseminate it to the groups is like very key.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thank you. I think we have enough time for one last question.
Well, now I wish I was at Isabelle's.
I think, so the next question that I would like to ask is, in terms of the way that the volumes or the projects are assigned, in case one opts for a hybrid model, how would best practices come in terms of what would you be assigning the internal teams and what would you be assigning to the external teams? What's your take on that? I don't know if Isabelle's can take this one, perhaps? No. Oh, I think you're on mute, Isabelle, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, now I can hear you.
I have a bit of a problem with the sound, so I wasn't completely sure about your question. Is it how you best assign?
Yes, correct. If you have internal and external, what would be your choice?
Well, there's many aspects you have to take into account. I mean, first of all, it's the actual volume of the work and the speed, the turnaround that's required. I mean, obviously, the project is just so big that you need to put 15 people on it. We cannot often put all our 15 linguists in one particular language on a thing. So we would then use a hybrid model, like you say. We would use maybe 2 senior people to really supervise the efforts of the freelance people. Because you just can't suddenly concentrate completely on just one project or one client. And the other thing, which I also mentioned before, of course, has to do with subject matter expertise. So you may have a particularly difficult software project, which has to do with, I don't know, airplanes or railways. And there you simply have to go to the expert and then maybe carefully analyze the project and see, once the glossary and the term base has been established and the general style and so on, you may be able to assign a team from your in-house people, but you will still rely on a senior specialist to kind of supervise it and make sure that the end product is really up to scratch.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your involvement and participation today. We are at time, so I don't want to cut anybody off, but there's been a lot of comments, a lot of questions, a lot of comments about the cat.